Hi everybody, appreciate y'all letting us come speak with y'all today. Dad, thanks for the invitation. Bryant Blakemore, this is Kiki Kung, and we both have had some very unique experiences in our lives through motorsport, through our careers, and through some neurodiversity, we'll call it. And through those experiences, we come to discover about ourselves can be positive tools not only in our racing careers but also in the business world as well. And so we're here to talk to y'all today a little bit about that and our experiences shared with that and how it may benefit y'all and your businesses and things like that in the future. I'm Bryant Blakemore. I race off-road cars. I've raced off-road cars since 2015. By that I mean I personally race what's called a Class 8 truck. It's a 3/4 ton 4-wheel drive Dodge pickup. It's modified to run in the desert. Some of you may be familiar with Baja racing, the Baja 1000. That might be the most familiar one that you've heard of. I actually just got back from the Baja 1000 about 2 weeks ago. And at that race, I was basically truck to me, and then I did all of their logistics and planning for them to participate in that event. It was 1,310 miles from La Paz at the bottom of the Baja Peninsula all the way up to Ensenada. We made it about 1,150 miles before we ran out of time. Not only do I help other teams with their race programs, but I race myself. That's me in my race vehicle. I've raced races such as the Nora Mexican 1000. I've raced the Mint 400. I've raced 2 series in Texas. And I've raced, I think that's it in my truck. I did the Mint 400 3 times. Next on my list is to race Vegas to Reno, which is a point-to-point race from Las Vegas to Reno, Nevada. That's coming up in August. I've had a lifelong passion for automobiles, very singular focus, which later in my life was explained to me why it was such a singular focus. And it was difficult to explain my interest in cars and how passionate I am for them, especially to my family. They did not understand. I don't come from a car family, so it's kind of a unique thing for me to have and then grow up with. When I was about 7 years old, I was introduced to Baja racing through a picture book from Eduardo Caso. He showed me some pictures of when he was in Baja back in the late 80s, and it just was ingrained in my brain for life. It took me 20 years in order to get my own truck and start racing myself, but that was my goal for my life. That was the top of my bucket list, was to race my own truck in Baja for 1,000 miles, and I did that in 2017. Because of that, I needed a career that would sustain that type of activity. It's not cheap, and I am 100% self-funded at this point. About 16 years ago, I started working in the oil field. I started with a company called Pathfinder, and we ran the electronics package that allows you to steer and drill a horizontal oil well. I've been in that same business for a decade and a half, and I've just recently moved to the position of directional driller, which is the person that actually does the steering of the well and will control where the well bore goes in order to stay within the production zone that we're trying to drill. Again, with what I found out about myself about a year and a half ago, it makes sense that I moved into a career like this and that I was successful at it. 15 years in the oil field is a long time. 15 years in the oil field with never being laid off is even longer. It's kind of rare. Most of the people that I work with have been laid off at least once or twice. Fortunately, through work ethic and my intensity of focus, I was able to not ever have that happen. I was able to continue working through all the downturns and everything like that. But I found that my job, because it is mechanical in nature, it works very well with my brain. In addition to that, the work environment was also something that I was very comfortable with, which a lot of people are not. You're away from home frequently, from weeks to months at a time. You're in very remote, desolate places. You're with close quarters with a small group of people, so you have to be able to get along with them and survive in that type of environment. And I've seen a lot of people wash out because they can't be away from home that long and things like that. So that leads me to my neurodivergent diagnosis. In the summer of 2022, I had a semi-traumatic experience in my life that forced me to evaluate my mental state and try to figure out why I was reacting in certain ways towards certain situations. That led me to do some research online. I took some quizzes, and then I found a professional in Lubbock, Texas, where I live, that I sat down with him and started just telling him my story. Within the first 5 minutes, he said, "You're autistic." And I had no idea. I had gone my entire life without knowing that, but the moment that he told me that, it was like a weight was lifted off of me. I used the example of a really nice padlock. When you unlock a really nice padlock, you can hear it click, and the springs push the lock apart, and you just feel the tension just gone out of that lock. That's what happened to me instantaneously, because it explained everything about my life. It explains why I have hyper obsession with automobiles and with cars and mechanical things, and no other interests outside of that. I don't hunt, fish, golf, sports, don't care about any of that at all. It also explains why I'm able to work in the oil field as productively as I do, because I don't need to be around a lot of people. I'm not interested in large social gatherings unless it's a race. So I'm well equipped, because of the way my brain is wired, to work in that industry and be very successful at it. And once he told me that, I immediately needed to find an outlet for using that, because it can be referred to as a disability, but I don't like that, because I am not disabled. I've never been disabled. I'm very successful in what I do, both racing and in my career and in dealing with normal everyday life. I own my own home and all these things, that are the metrics of being successful. I do all those. So I'm not disabled in any way. And I needed to use that diagnosis as something to help other people like me. A lot of times when you hear about autism and things of that nature, you often think of children and not adults. And those children grow up into adults. And then there are many adults like myself that have gone their entire lives without knowing that they had some difference in their brain from other people. And so I started speaking with my counselor about what I could do, how can I use this as a tool to help other people. He got me hooked up with the Burkhart Center at Texas Tech, which is an autism research and education facility whose sole focus is adults 18 to 30. And they teach them how to live independently, hold down jobs, they put them in internship programs, and survive in the world on their own. So I met with them, and at my last race, the Mint 400 in March this year, I had a charity drive attached to that race in which people could donate per mile of the race that we completed. Amazingly, it was a feat just to get to the race. I'm sole funded by myself, and most of the work, the mechanic work on the truck, and then preparing for the race and planning and pitch strategy and towing the race vehicle out there, that's all me, and I do it mostly by myself. So it was an enormous challenge for me to get to that event. Plus I had just been loaded on with this information that my brain is odd, you know, and has been my whole life. So I was going through all of that at the same time. The race was in March, so January, you know, December through February, trying to do the last minute prep to get to the race was quite a challenge, very difficult. We went to the race. We represented the Burkhardt Center. We were able to talk to a lot of people about it publicly during tech and contingency and face-to-face with people, which is something that I'm glad I was able to do. And then we ended up raising just under $12,000 for the Burkhardt Center, which was probably one of their single largest monetary donations that they've had. And it was all because I found out something about myself, and I needed to use that as a positive tool in not my life, but in others, you know, to be of service to others. So that's led me here and to speak with y'all about my experiences in not only racing and how my brain functions and how it benefits racing, but also in what I've noticed can be an advantage in the business world. And for people that own businesses looking for quality employees and things like that, there is a pool of employees that may go overlooked because there are stigmatisms attached to them, and that's something that we're hoping we can change.
So, hi everybody, my name is Kiki, and I come all the way here to see you guys from Taiwan. So this is my first Rotary talk. I've been invited in Taiwan before to talk at other Rotary charters, but I've turned them down because of my busy work schedule. But this time I was lucky enough visiting this guy, and then had Mark invite us. So I was really honored and really excited about this. So just to let's tell you guys a little bit about myself. I am also a race driver. Currently I am a rally driver, but I race in all sorts of motorsports series. I started in karting, Rotax karts. I was, for a while, I was living in Shanghai, so I was top 6 in all of China for 3 years. And after that, I got into some circuit racing, and then I started to get into really focusing on helping young drivers develop their skills and really trying to help them build up who they are as drivers and how to help them package themselves, because motorsports is all about marketing, and that's what I was doing for a while, helping these kids. And like Bryant, I had a fascination with cars and motorsports ever since I was a little girl. I remember specifically when I was 4 years old, I told my dad that I wanted to become a race car driver. And he said, well, you can't, because we don't have a lot of money. And I always remember him telling me specifically, you never race with your money. You never race with our own money. And I've been really blessed because for my whole racing career, which I started in 2014, I've never touched a single dime from my family. So I've been lucky enough to be sponsored and, you know, to be a good driver, and to, most importantly, to have a good platform. I might not win all the races, but I always believe that I wanted to have a good platform where I can give positive messages to young people, especially to young women. So mostly my focus is women in motorsports. So I am currently the national representative for the Women in Motorsports Committee for the FIA. So the FIA is the governing body for most motorsports all over the world, and it's based in France. And we have a Women in Motorsports Committee. So through this, before the committee started, I already knew that I wanted to encourage young girls and women to really get involved in motorsports. And there are so many different parts of motorsports to be involved in, not only as a driver, but there's lots of STEM programs for women and getting into mechanics. And this is where I lead into my neurodivergence. So he was diagnosed in 2022. I was diagnosed in September 2021. So almost a year apart. And my job, when I'm not racing, I own my own media production company with my father, and we focus on automotive things and motorsports stuff, and using our media platform as well to create positive messages about road safety, about motorsports. A lot of people still have the idea that if you race, it's dangerous, you're racing, or it's street racing, things like that. Especially in Asia, motorsports still has kind of a negative tone towards it. So we're trying to change that, and we believe that through motorsports, we can actually educate people more about road safety. Because when you want speed, we tell you, get off the road, go to the circuits, get on the track. And that's something that my father and I, and me specifically, I've been doing that for the last 13 years of my life. And when I was diagnosed with ADHD, it was actually a very similar story to Bryant. During that time, it was COVID, and we were in lockdown, and I was going through a really hard time with depression and anxiety. And one day I just decided I needed to pick myself up. I went to see a psychiatrist, mostly for my depression and anxiety, and then I said, by the way, I've been suspecting for a while that I might have ADHD. And he's like, why do you think that? And then I started telling him about the things that had happened to me throughout my childhood. And that's another thing that's a bit different between girls and guys. Girls are really good at masking. So for most of my life, I had been masking my neurodivergence. I knew how to act normal. I was very active in school. I did all sorts. I did sports. I wasn't as much, I was hyper-focused on things because I got really into my student council work and community service and sports. I was in all kinds of sports teams. But to my teachers, they just thought, wow, Kiki is a really well-rounded student. They never really saw anything wrong with that. But actually, I was struggling a lot internally, which is something that we unpacked after my diagnosis, that I unpacked with my therapist, to realize actually that's not very normal. But despite all that, I think I was able to achieve a lot in my school career, and also in the 13 years that I've been working. I've been able to do so much, which we'll get into a little bit later. But that's basically a little bit about us and our diagnosis, and just a quick kind of summary of how we met. We met this year in March at the Mint. I was flown to the Mint by BF Goodrich Taiwan as a guest to visit the race and to do report, when I get back, to do TV report about the Mint. And they had on the first day, they had the driver's parade, and it was a big surprise. I had no idea that I was going to be put in one of those cars. And I get there, they matched each of us up with a driver, and I got into his car, could barely climb up, and then we just started talking, and it was really interesting how our conversation started. But basically within the first 10 minutes, we got into, he told me that he had recently been diagnosed, and I said, no way, I was diagnosed a year ago. And then that's when, throughout the whole parade, we were in the car talking and sharing our experiences of certain things that we had noticed growing up, and certain interactions with people. And for me, not only do I have ADHD, I also have autistic traits as well. So we're able to understand a lot of the things that we went through growing up, and even as adults. And what's unique about us is being diagnosed as an adult is a lot different because we had gone through a big chunk of our lives doing well in our fields, and then finally getting this diagnosis, and then like his lock, for me, it was a light bulb that went off. I felt like I finally had the answers to everything that I was so confused about who I was and why I did certain things, or why I felt really unhappy sometimes, and especially with people on the spectrum. Perfectionism is a thing. We never feel like we're doing, we always want to keep doing and making sure, you know, we want to do things perfect. And so for me, it was the light bulb, and it seemed like all the answers were revealed to me. And as a woman, as a neurodivergent woman, I was able to finally start to unmask and start to feel really comfortable in my skin, and which makes communicating with people a lot better than I was before. We're gonna get to the rest of our presentation, but what you guys can notice throughout our neurodivergence is that we are showing you really the spectrum, because we are from the opposite ends of the spectrum, but because it's a spectrum and every single person, every single neurodivergent person is unique and they show qualities and symptoms differently. This is, I think we are a really nice example of, you know, how amazing our brains are. So,
real briefly, the term neurodivergent is kind of new, and it's used to encapsulate a lot of different neurological differences. Autism being one, OCD, ADHD, things of all that nature, kind of all underneath that neurodivergent umbrella. And while they don't manifest themselves across the board, you know, if you have one, you may not have another or something like that. That's just the kind of terminology that's being used to cover all of these things. And essentially what they mean is that the way it was explained to me is that the way my brain is wired, the communication from left to right, right to left, there are bridges out. And so the neural pathways have to go in some other route to get to the other side. You know, and knowing that, I've been able to think on it and figure out ways to kind of patch some of those bridges. You know, because now I know, hey, my brain's going to try to do this, so I can personally counteract that and try to move in a more efficient direction. But all these disorders are underneath the divergent umbrella, and they're all on a scale to some degree. You know, and so I just want to put the disclaimer out there that not everyone who is autistic will be qualified to do the things that I do or that Kiki does or whatever. It doesn't work like that. But there are a large number of people that do fall under this umbrella that are displaced because they are either they don't know that they're here, like myself and like Kiki before our diagnosis, or in the business world, employers aren't sure how to handle that, and they look at it, it may be looked at as a problem in the workplace rather than looking at the strengths that may come from that type of brain function.
okay, so just to share some of my motorsport experience. So not only have I been a racer, I've really been involved in all sides of motorsports, and that's really something that I've been able to specialize in. So of course I actually started off as a motorsports journalist. So I covered all sorts of motorsports, Formula One, DTM, Porsche Carrera Cup, all sorts of motorsports. And because of that, I was able to attract sponsors to want to support me in my racing. And I was kind of a natural at racing. So I actually, at one point, I was the national driver for Republic of China, Taiwan. And I am the first woman in Taiwan to drive a formula car or an open wheel car. And as you can see, I've done all sorts of racing, but throughout my racing experience, I'm not one to just sit there like a princess and wait for everybody to, you know, take care of me and take care of my car. And also, I really like to get my hands dirty. And not only do I think it's important to get your hands dirty, but to be a good driver, you have to understand how your car works. So I started to learn more about my cars, to work on my cars, and because in Taiwan we also have a shortage of race mechanics because they cannot survive on motorsports alone, they cannot make a living out of it. We have a shortage of it, so a lot of times I had to really work on my cars by myself. And eventually when I have some of my younger drivers, I also have to do the mechanic work for them. But also, every single time, what my father and we do is, in Taiwan, we try to promote the sport as a healthy sport. And we also wanted to change people's mindset about race mechanics. You know, in Asia, people have money that, and it happens here too, where they just want to spend the money and be the driver and everyone takes care of that. But for us, we really want people to respect the mechanic's job and skill and knowledge, because if you don't have the mechanics, you don't have a car. You don't have a good car to race. And that was a really important message that we wanted to spread across, which led me to, for a short while, we tried to do a mechanics program for people to come and join and learn for free how to be a karting mechanic and work on the Rotax engines. And of course, then I had to wear several different hats. I was a team manager. I also had to learn how to be an engineer, read the data for my drivers, and I was also the team manager for a GT team where we were running two Porsche 911 GT cars at once. So I was running two Porsches, one team full of Japanese mechanics and the other team full of Malaysian mechanics, and learning how to communicate and make everyone happy. So that was a really fun experience for me. And throughout all these years, I still continue to do my motorsports journalist stuff. So really, I was able to wear a lot of different hats and be able to manage and see the importance of all these different areas of motorsports. And through that, I can tell people why you have to do a certain role, or why this job is important, or if you're interested in motorsports, what fits you. There's always something that fits. So I think this is my part where my ADHD really played a huge role in everything that I've done. And the best part is, I did all of this before my diagnosis. Yeah. So that's a little bit about my motorsports.
So for me, in my race program, I noticed that looking back at it before being diagnosed, again, hyper-focus. This is the only thing I care about doing. I'm not interested in doing anything else. Whenever I'm not at work to pay for this, I'm in my shop. I spend more time in my shop than I do in my house or anywhere else. And after being diagnosed, I noticed that singular focus allowed me to be very precise in maintaining my car, in being able to develop good pitch strategies and putting teams together. Even though I may be socially awkward and have difficulty communicating with people, I can see the talents of others and know where they fit in my team or don't fit in my team. And I'm able to, you know, make those decisions between the groups of people that want to come help me and volunteer to help. I can place them in roles that I know that they will be successful in, because I am able to empathize with them on their abilities. You know, like some guys, for example, the way we fuel our race car is with an 11-gallon dump can that weighs about 80 pounds, and someone has to heat it up over their head. Well, I can pick people that I know will be able to do that repetitively, because I understand how the mechanics of that job works, and I view it differently. It also has helped me in that while I get excited about racing, I'm not particularly emotional. I do not suffer from the red mist that a lot of race car drivers suffer from. I'm not egotistical about it. I don't have to win. I want to enjoy the experience, especially because I'm paying for it. So I want the most enjoyment for myself and for my team more than anything else. And that has allowed me to save the car, to have a relatively high completion rate in the races that I have raced in. I think out of 15 races I've done, I've only not finished 3. And there's a lot of drivers that spend a whole lot more money than I do and have much more capable teams and vehicles than I do that don't finish any race. And a lot of that is because they let their emotions get the best of them. Well, when I'm in the car, it is my Zen place. The only focus I have is to be in a car and to get the car to the checkered flag. That is the #1 most important thing. I don't care what place I'm going to be in, it doesn't matter. In my type of racing, the attrition rate is very high. At the Baja 1000 this last year, they only expected 30% of all the cars to make it to the finish line. And that was probably pretty accurate. So if you can't get to the end, it doesn't matter how fast you are or how much money you spend in this type of motorsport. It does not matter. So that's another part of where the way my brain functions has allowed me to be professional and successful in my motorsports career, because I view the entire process from a different angle than most people do, and I'm involved in every single piece of the process because that is my area of interest.
Okay, so it seems like even just the motorsports side of me, I've done a lot. But in my work side, when I'm not racing, I'm doing a lot as well. So I'm in media production, and in Taiwan, I'm also a TV sports personality. I'm also what we call a KOL, or an influencer. And basically, what I do is a lot of media work, mostly TV stuff and doing some acting. And lately, I've found a new area where I'm really interested in, which is teaching ESL. So teaching English as a second language, because for me, through my experiences in motorsports, language has been such an important part of everything. As a young Chinese woman traveling around the world in a sport that is predominantly male, it has been tough. So how do you overcome these things? My language skills have always been a strong suit of mine. So when I grew up in Singapore, so my first language is English. My second language is actually French. And then my third language is my mother tongue, which I didn't speak as well, but it was Mandarin. And ever since I was a little kid, I just really liked to learn a lot of different languages, but I wasn't able to master it all, which is something that happens to a lot of ADHD kids. You're good at everything, but you're the master of none, right? So as I started working and flying around Europe doing motorsports, my French was able to help me overcome a lot of things. You know, a lot of times you'll come across troubles where, you know, they're they might not speak our language, so it's kind of easy to, you know, get them in trouble with some of the rules and things like that. So I really noticed that, or I really know that language is so important. And that's what I've been trying to do now in Taiwan, is to really encourage children, young children, to speak English and to teach them so that they can use their language skills and really be able to be jet setters and go leave Taiwan and do better work or find better jobs and things like that, or not be limited to the things that they can do. So a lot of what I've been doing in Taiwan and with media is to do a lot of English media stuff that is trying to teach them and things like that. So even that work, I'm a director, I'm a producer, I'm a writer, I'm a presenter. So I'm able to do all these things because I'm neurodivergent.
I spoke about this a little bit earlier. In my line of work, it's a benefit to me the way that I function, in that I am able to work long hours in remote places, and it doesn't concern me. You know, I don't need to be home. I'm not missing anybody at the house or my friends or anything like that. I know that I have this function to perform. In addition to that, the way my brain works towards mechanics, because that is my hyper focus, I understand what's going on at a very technical level of my job, and so I can explain that to people, or when there are issues, I'm able to diagnose those issues quickly and speak with the company men or the oil company representatives and show them what's going on and how things can change or need to be improved upon. I've noticed also that after my diagnosis, people were pretty accepting of that. A lot of them already kind of figured something like that with me, but because I don't have a lot of that social interaction need, I'm a loner, so to speak, which doesn't bother me, but it helps reduce office drama, you know, and gossip and things like that, because I have no interest in participating in any of that. So it makes me a very good employee for these companies. I don't stir up a bunch of shit. So what are some of the things in the workplace that you may recognize from some of your own employees? Perceived attitude. I've got a great example of this. When I do my job, I'm very procedural oriented. There is a way to do the job, and it gets done in this order. A lot of the rig hands, the roughnecks on the rig floor, try to jump in and grab tools and, you know, hold things for me and move stuff around, and I'm very short with them. In my mind, it's not a big deal, but I have been told before, hey, you're kind of an asshole. And, you know, to hear that from a roughneck is kind of, you know, but that's one of the things that I realized after my diagnosis, is that I am very short and to the point, and not trying to be rude, but that's the job, and this is my job and my responsibility, and it needs to be done in this way in order for it to be successful at the end. And if we do something out of order, it will throw me off. And then I cannot personally guarantee that the job is going to be completed correctly, because something was done in the wrong way. So you may have some employees that you notice whenever a step is skipped, or they're made to hurry up or take a shortcut or something like that, it really throws them off. And then basically the rest of that project is trash after that. That is a sign of some sort of neurodivergent brain, because procedure is very important.
Yeah. And I think the reason why we wanted to include this as one of our slides is because, like us, being diagnosed in our 30s, there are a lot of people that have gone their whole lives undiagnosed. My father, 65 years old, was only diagnosed these last couple of months. And for him, it was a big step, because to finally come to terms that his mind processes things differently. So it was hard. It was a hard conversation. But the thing is, a lot of people can go their whole lives undiagnosed, and that's fine. But I think part of what Brian and I hope that we can continue to do is to speak more about things like this, because we believe that if we help people recognize certain signs and understand neurodiversity, it can help people have a better workplace environment.
Okay. Just a couple other quick points that you may notice of people that work for you or work underneath you or around you. The hyper-focus thing people get in the zone, especially if they're doing a job which is something they enjoy, and they will have no interest in doing anything else, and they will ignore basically everything else. They'll ignore eating meals even to get the task done. However, the opposite of that is people being seemingly inattentive, and that's a lot of the ADHD is kind of the way that that's described as, oh, well, he just doesn't pay attention. Well, that's not true. They're just paying attention to multiple things at once. Like Kiki has said, all the hats that she can wear while she is doing these different activities, but still be able to make forward progress on every single one of those projects as well. So some of the advantages, we've talked about this a little bit. If you can place someone that is neurodivergent in a field in which they have even the slightest interest, they will be the most valuable employee you've ever had in that interest. For me, working in the oil field 15 plus years, I've never had a bad issue with that. I've been very successful in that career, and that's because I have just the slightest interest in that job. I find it interesting. If it's a job, well, I worked for my dad for a little bit, and I would sleep under the desk instead of doing the work because I have zero interest in that. I could not work in an office. It would be unsuccessful. Procedural compliance. If your job is something in which you are able to give a very specific direction, do the job this way. Someone who is neurodivergent will do the job exactly that way. And when you come to them and say, hey, why did you do this? They'll bring the book out and say, because you told me to. But it will be done exactly that way, and it will be done exactly that way every single time.
Well, and just to add on to that, like Bryant is a really good example of that, because he has had instances at work where things have not had a SOP or anything, but he's been able to create a set of SOP to help those around him do the job more efficiently.
Yeah, that leads into efficiency recognition. People that view the world in this way are able to find what needs to be removed in order to make a job more efficient. Reduce workplace conflict because they stick to themselves. However, that is countered with, the way that neurodivergent people may speak to you. That is also an advantage because it is quicker communication. If you take the emotion out of it and don't get offended when you get 1 or 2 word answers that seem curt. It does not require an explanation of that, so I'm going to tell you yes, no, and then go on about my next job. I don't need to tell you a whole story about all that. Leadership abilities, that's something I talked about with my race program, how I'm able to find people and place them in positions that I think that they can use because of empathic view of their skill sets. Analytical skills, again, people who are neurodivergent are often very logical thinking, and they think in the most direct way that they possibly can. So a lot of things that a lot of people do don't make sense. Why would you do that? That was inefficient. That cost extra money. That did this, did that. So using those skills in the workplace, the neurodivergent person is able to help with cost and efficiency and things like that because they take a very logical approach to the situation. Again, removing the emotion of what you're doing. So what are some things that you can do in your workplace? The hiring process can be overwhelming for people who are neurodivergent and people who aren't even. The sit-down face-to-face interview, hand me your resume, okay, this is what it says, that's nice, we'll talk to you, maybe or maybe not. That doesn't get a good assessment of the skill set of that person or how their mind functions, which may be of greater benefit to your company. So adjusting the hiring process is something that can be done in the workplace. Flexible working schedule. The way the way that people who are neurodivergent work may not always fit a 9 to 5. You know, they may not structure themselves that way. They may work less, they may work more, but they will always get the work done because they know, you know, if there's a deadline at the end, they know that that's the deadline. But they may not conform to the, you know, typical rules of how a day should be structured. Adjusting communication methods, streamlining procedures, and reducing micromanagement styles, things like that, again, all fall back to the logic process. I don't need you to stand, you gave me the list. This is how the job is done. Don't stand over me and watch me do it and then comment on it every time. I will do it exactly the way it is written on this list. You want to add anything? No? Okay. Again, back to the hiring process, if you can recognize specific talents and skills and interests, this is something that the Burkhardt Center does. They try to place the students at the Burkhardt into internship programs in which that person shows any interest at all. For example, they had one student that was interested in sports. That was his hyper focus. So they put him out at a golf course, working at the golf course. The golf course came back after the internship and said, we want this guy full time. He's the best employee we've ever had. You know, he can get along with the other co-workers because they like to talk about sports and they can interact there. And then he likes sports, and that is a job related to sports. I like cars. My job is related to mechanical things. It also logically pays for my racing.
I think the last thing, creating an inclusive and comfortable workplace, this is the first step I think a lot of employers can do, is first by understanding what it is, what it means to be neurodivergent. And when you open up, you as a leader, as an employer, open up to neurodivergent people, a lot of people will be able to be more honest through the hiring process, through the interview process. Because we know that a lot of people, they hide the fact that they have autism or they have ADHD, things like that. And like Brian said earlier, if they are hiding these things, if they're not being able to communicate it more directly, it is harder for the employer to determine or analyze this person's skill set. So we believe that by creating an inclusive environment, which also includes when the workplace, when everybody starts to open up about being neurodivergent, the overall working experience is so much happier and lighter, and people won't step on each other's toes because they understand. My workplace, the studio that I work at, everyone is neurodivergent. We produce shows, and it turned out everybody's neurodivergent, so we know how this person works, this person, and then everyone gets things done instead of constantly fighting and bickering and things like that.
So, as mentioned, those are some of the benefits that can be applied to the business world. Increased productivity. If you understand how your potential employees work, you can use their work schedules to your advantage. Company morale, when people are able to be a little more free about themselves and not have to mask, I know that it's helped me improve my overall happiness and enjoyment when I understand how I function and how I'm going to function around other people. Of course, the public image is always a benefit when you show that your company is open to hiring neurodivergent people that can fulfill the task. Increased product and service quality. Again, attention to detail is something that our brains are drawn to. That screw is not turned the right way. All, you know, down to that type of detail are things that we notice. The employee pool opens up because there's a large group of people who feel stigmatized and have a hard time finding work because once they say they're autistic, people kind of feel nervous about that. So if you are open to that and building a relationship with those types of people, that opens your employee pool. Of course, it also increases your company diversity. And like what Kiki said, you may find that more people than you originally thought are neurodivergent. I've been finding that recently in my personal life. People are coming to me after I've been public about it, saying, man, I need to look into this too, you know, because I do some of the things that you say and whatnot. And so there's a lot out there, and I think the neurotypical, which is the opposite of neurodivergent, they are going to be the minority, you know.
So, of course, this whole neurodiversity, it is a spectrum. Everybody is different. Not everybody is going to be like Bryant and I. There are people that will be more severe than us. But I think once we're able to change the mindset, that can help neurodivergent people come out of their shell and learn how to work with what they have, and then, you know, hopefully,
Yeah, that can benefit your businesses as well by having people that are goal-oriented to your success and not just theirs.
Yeah.
Very